there a moment where we can say no?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So to give some context to everybody at home, you should know exactly what Nord Stream is and understand exactly what happened. But the very short version that I understand it as, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Nord Stream was the pipeline that Russia used to supply Germany with energy.
Yeah, and through Germany, the rest of Europe, obviously.
Yeah, and the German economy especially was based on cheap energy from Russia. And then this proxy war between America and Russia began in Ukraine. America made the phone call and forced all the European leaders to lockstep behind them because Europe is the vassal state of America now. There's not a single European leader with any degree of sovereignty. They just do what America says.
Correct.
Even if they self-implode and destroy their own constituents and populations. And then they were afraid that the local populations, especially in Germany, would start to realize that the price of energy is getting too high and that the economy is getting wrecked, and they may change the politics and change the politicians and go pro-Russian to get the cheap energy back. So America decided to blow up the pipeline, meaning that it doesn't matter which political party you vote for, they simply can't send energy anymore.
Yeah.
So America, as your friend, as your ally, destroyed the most critical infrastructure that exists in Europe.
And there's a second thing to it, because that so the one thing is the bombing of the pipeline, but the other thing is the forced climate change policies that are affecting to
I'm very scared. I'm very scared of climate change. Very worried.
That's why you keep buying all these cars that are known to be super fuel efficient, right?
No, I buy all the Ferraris so that I can leave them parked in my collection so no one else can drive them. So I'm actually an environmentalist.
But the deindustrialization of Europe is happening in front of our very eyes, and that means that the German car industry is moving away, is losing its competitiveness. The Dutch steel industry, and so on and so forth. We have chemical industry in the Netherlands. Other countries are facing the same fate, and that also, in the short term, seems to benefit the American economy because America is way behind all these climate change measures. But ultimately, it's also going to come for America, and the West is really organizing its own economic suicide. And again, I know that a lot of things seem really bleak, and traditionally the people turning up to vote at European elections is extremely low. It's like in the Netherlands, it's been something around 35 or 40% only.
Yep.
But if we can get a critical mass of people turning out and voting, we can see, I think we can see a massive shift in the debate, in the kind of parties that are gaining power. So I'm not just talking to a Dutch audience here, of course, I'm talking to an international audience. And I think we really need to start finding politicians that are not compromised by all these mega trends, that are not supporting the war in Ukraine, that are not supporting the climate change mystique, and that are really standing up for their own people.
Well, I completely agree, but this is where I'm going to play devil's advocate. And please, at any point, I really am here to be corrected, because I'm just a dumb kickboxer, right? You're a politician. Right. You know all how it works. I'm just some kickboxer.
I think I can mention to your followers that you did not dare play chess with me.
Not yet. So I'm just a stupid kickboxer, right? So I have these views on things, but I would like to think of Europe as the cradle of modern civilization, and it's certainly created some of the most beautiful archetypes that people can imagine, and some of the most beautiful buildings and art and civilizations that have ever existed. And I believe it's crumbling in real time. And I think that when you were talking about the acceleration of the deindustrialization of Europe, that's such a big problem now, because I can't think of very much Europe makes at all. I mean, the Middle East has energy, Russia has energy. You have the global South that have people, they have population, which is also extremely important. Although AI is coming along, people will always have some degree of value, at least in the short term. So you have huge population booms in Africa and in South America. You have Asia, which can produce things. And then it feels like the Western world is just built on interest rates and usury and buying a house hoping the price goes up and false banking garbage bubble. And it's all just a bunch of shit. And as soon as it starts to pop, we're in a lot of trouble because we don't actually make very much of value ourselves. And the few things we do make of value, even the food we grow, is under attack by the system itself.
Yeah.
So I feel like, am I wrong in believing that one of the main reasons we're in so much trouble is because Europe and America, because of the way their economies function, because it's all just built on imaginary numbers on a screen, is actually very vulnerable?
It is, but it's also the place, having had such a magnificent history that where some of the best people are still living. And to give you an example about energy.
I am here. You're right.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm here too, and lots of other people. I mean, we're not there yet. And just one example: the Netherlands has the largest natural gas field in the whole of Europe, the entirety of Europe. Now the Dutch politicians, in their ultimate wisdom, and we saw the disclaimer already, Joe Biden isn't always right. It's always also the Dutch government. They're always right, guys. They've decided to dump 500 meters of concrete on all the exit points of the gas field, so that no future generations will ever be able to harvest it. That's because climate change. That's because we need to move forward and that kind of thing. And we really need to correct that kind of mindset.
Okay, so this. Okay, I don't.
So it's not.
This is suicide. So this is suicide. This is suicide for Europe. They're committing suicide because if you look at things on a very fundamental level, without energy, you have nothing. You need energy for everything. The whole world could basically be energy wars. Whoever has the most energy is going to do very well. It doesn't matter, even if you're playing a video game, Command and Conquer, even if you're terrible at the game, if you have unlimited credits and can keep printing out troops, you're going to win in the end. So energy is nearly everything. You just talked about something I didn't know about. You're talking about the Netherlands committing suicide by destroying the large patch of gas for basically no reason besides this climate change garbage. And my question to you is this. That's clearly and obviously suicide. So, one, why are they doing it? Because they don't believe in climate change, that's a lie. I don't believe that they believe in it. I believe that climate change is a Trojan horse for communism. I think they're doing
controlling the economy.
To control everything. So, are there any leaders in Europe, besides Orban, who I'm a fan of, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you know something I don't, who actually care about their people and do what is in best interest of their people? Or is every single leader in Europe just completely cucked to the globalist mentality and they're prepared to destroy their sovereign wealth of their own nations to try and please the overlords?
Well, I rather liked Fico, who was shot in Slovakia, actually. That's a terrible story. But and it's a great question. Here's the thing. So there, among the European population, there's a genuine trend now, feeling of we need change. But what's been happening is that the system, in its self-preserving way, has been putting forward these populist leaders that seem to be opposition, but in the end are ultimately all on the same level, on the same page with the establishment. And in the Netherlands, it's a very clear example. Geert Wilders, you know, the guy with the Mozart hair. Yeah. I think most people know him. He's very famous because of his criticism of Islam, and was very brave at doing that. And he has put immigration on the agenda, which is a serious issue, and we need to talk about that. But he has now won the elections by a landslide, and he has been, failing to form a coalition government up until now. Finally presenting his candidate for prime ministership in the Dutch system. That's not an automatic connection, so the one who wins the elections doesn't necessarily become the prime minister. You need to form this majority coalition. But the candidate for prime ministership is the current, now he's going to be the former head of the Secret Service of the Netherlands. He completely supports the war in Ukraine. He was all over with the vaccines and COVID. So and he has acknowledged that there's a climate change problem. So you see there's this kind of opposition that is not actual opposition. And I think that's the thing about the democratic system reaching a sort of dead end where you vote for somebody else because you think, okay, this is going to disrupt the system, and what you get is more of the same. So do they actually believe in all the things that they're doing, or are they just absorbed by this power-hungry energy that's all about the political institutions? I think very much the latter. You're right about that. But there's also responsibility of the people that we're addressing, the people that we're talking to, the people that we're trying to rally to the voting ballot. If you want change, you often do have an option, but it might not be the quote-unquote strategic voting option. It might be a small party that nobody has ever heard of. It might be doing something else. But really, I think we need to be on the watch of controlled opposition movements.
Well, this is a really interesting conversation, because you said earlier about the fact, you hinted to Geert and you said that people who you believe are going to be different. I mean, what's the prime minister of Italy? Everyone was talking about how fantastic she was going to be.
Exactly.
And now we have triple the immigration into Italy than before she was in power.
And completely backing the Ukraine war.
Yeah, completely.
And she was there on COVID. Blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely. So, but isn't this a flaw with the democratic system in the first place? This is where perhaps, and I have to self-analyze, and sometimes I catch myself and I try and think, am I aiding the enemy when I say things like democracy doesn't work and voting's a waste of time because it's all rigged? Does that actually aid them? Is that what they want? Do they want people to not even turn up? Perhaps what you're saying is what they do want. To make it at least harder for them to rig it, because my view of all these things now is we talk about trying to get politicians who are genuinely free thinking and care about their people. But the minefield that they have to step over to get to the top without getting caught up in a legal case, fake rape case, some kind of disqualification, some kind of garbage tax case which disqualifies them. The whole point of this democratic system, and the reason the American empire tries to spread democracy everywhere, is because it can be rigged, and they can rig it by simply finding the candidates which will go lockstep with the globalist agenda and supporting them with the media machine, and then finding the ones who won't and attacking them with the legal machine.
And also the thing about politicians in democratic systems is that they are only in power for 4 years or 8 years, which is way not long enough to get a real grip on the system. And you have the deep state, that's the civil servants and the bureaucrats that have been there for 30 years, and they're far more knowledgeable in dossiers and so on. So that's definitely true. Yet what we've been trying to do, and that's also why I think it's very important that we reach out and that there are other people, is we're trying to get into the civil society and to be a movement that's much broader than merely participating in elections. We've set up a school, for example, to fight the transgender propaganda. We've been setting up a network of farmers to get people proper food and all these things. And that is, I think, going to be massively influential if people copy that model across the West. And of course, in these bleak times, it's very easy to just sit down and say, okay, I'm a pessimist. I don't believe in anything anymore. But if we look at the way the communist bloc crumbled, if you would have told someone in 1987,
that's true,
it's going to end.
That's true.
And even more so, it's going to end without a single bullet shot.
Very true.
Everybody would have said, "Oh, okay, there he is again, the politician rallying for votes or whatever." But we need to keep hope, and we still, I feel that we're still great people. I still love Europeans. I think we still have so much to work on from. So I just can't give up. Genuinely be pessimistic. I feel maybe if in fights you've encountered that as well. You're like, okay, well, and then at some point you're just KOing your opponent. And you're like, oh, did I win this? Well, I never imagined I would, but I did.
Absolutely, and I think the matrix is cracking, and a lot of the people at home are starting to realize the truth about the world, which is very important. There are truths which people at home now understand, which only a few short years ago everybody would argue against you for. Yeah. And I think that people are starting to slowly realize and understand that nearly every politician, especially in Europe, because I think the European politicians are the worst of all. The American politicians, we can have a whole conversation about, but they give orders around the world, and they give orders for the benefit of themselves or perhaps the benefit of America. But European politicians, it seems, just literally commit suicide day after day at the direct directive of the American empire. And you have to sit and understand that they don't work for you. And the politicians aren't working for the people they're supposed to represent. And they're not working for the constituents. And they're not working for the people who voted for them. They're working for somebody else. Which is why I often see when I talk about politics with people, and I think that that's a big mistake. To think that the people who rule over you are stupid, well then guess what that makes you? I wouldn't call them stupid. I would call them cunning. I would say that they're frauds. I would say they'll say anything it takes to get into power, and they'll deliberately misrepresent their power and ignore the will of their people because they're effectively committing fraud because they're working for somebody else. They're not working for the people, and they play stupid, or they're actually very happy for you to think they're stupid as opposed to think they're conniving and cunning. If you're going to get into power and you're going to deliberately abuse that power, and you're going to deliberately ignore the wills of your people to do evil things at the behest of someone else who you work for, I'd rather them think I was stupid than them understand I knew exactly what I was doing. I think these people know exactly what they're doing as they tank Europe.
Well, they went into politics because they loved power. They didn't particularly love ideas, or they weren't idealistic about some particular thing. Because if you're like that, if that's your character, if that's what you're made of, then you're going to fail at the first test or the second test. You can't make it till the prime ministership or so that's true. And in a way, I accept that role, that being an idealistic guy rather than a power-driven guy. I accept that maybe I'm not going to win the kind of a landslide election victory, but I do think that you have a great stage.
Are there
And
any,
we can inspire people.
are there any politicians in Europe who you believe genuinely care about their people besides Fico and Orban? I'm getting you in trouble now. You can at any point bow out of this question. I'm just a dumb kickboxer. You don't have to talk to me. I'm just curious. If there's anyone you actually have met where you look at and you go, oh, they're not a total idiot.
Well, there's Dries van Langenhoven in Belgium.
Okay.
He's a good guy. I'm probably going to meet a lot of people from Germany, from Germany in the European Parliament that are genuine. I think they're genuine. I think there are going to be other people elected. I like the Miha Zank movement in Hungary as well. That's also a friend of mine. I think we do have people that are genuine. And I think there are ever more youngsters, especially, who are also genuine about this, who are willing to engage in this battle. And also, that's another area where the fight is fought, which is starting families. So what I dislike about democratic debates is that they tend to focus exclusively on the state. So there seems to be an inherent socialist, if you will, tendency in any democratic argument, because it's like, okay, the state has to solve this. We have to look at the state. We have to vote people, and it's important to vote for people. And it's important that in the political arena there are different voices, but ultimately people are in control of their own lives. They are the captain of their ship, and if you're not having children as a society, then there's no politician that can fix that for you.
Absolutely. And so it's interesting you mentioned this because I put out a tweet which upset all the white people of the world. They all attacked me and got really upset because I told them the truth about themselves. But this is interesting because I was about to ask, what do you think are the largest problems that Europe currently faces? Because when I say Europe is collapsing, if I say to a beautiful woman, I say this, I'm sitting with a beautiful girl, I'm on a date, I'm like, Europe's collapsing. She's like, I don't get it. What do you mean it's collapsing? A lot of people don't understand.
I have a smartphone.
Yeah, I have a smartphone. You have a nice car. I'm at dinner. What's collapsing? I don't understand. So a lot of people don't understand why Europe is collapsing, which I wanted to talk about. But we can start just there with families, because families are effectively how you control and maintain a population dynamic. And I don't think that countries are simply borders on a map. And I don't think countries' culture is destined by the type of trees that grow there. It's the people within the country, right?
Of course.
If you take all of the Ethiopians and move them to Norway, and all the Norwegians and move them to Ethiopia, the countries will be completely different places, operating in completely different ways than they did previously, because it's the people that make the country. So if you want to keep Europe European effectively, you need people having European children. And that doesn't happen in Europe anymore. The birth rate is off a cliff. And I pointed that out. I said it in my typical style. I was as abrasive as possible. But I highlighted to the white man, and I'm mixed race, I'm half white, half black, and I said, look, you have less children than the people you're inviting into your countries are going to be replaced.
Yeah.
And they got very upset with me.
Are you familiar with the Replacement Migration Committee of the United Nations?
I've heard about this, and I want you to tell me why they're doing it.
So maybe just for the viewers, so there's an official document, an official committee.
No conspiracy theory. It's written down.
You can Google it. You can find it on the internet, and they are concerned with replacement migration. And their argument essentially is, okay, so birth rates are declining in Europe, in the developed world generally. We need growth for housing prices to continue to go up. We need growth for businesses, which I think in itself is a fallacy. We can entertain that further if you like, but it's not true that a declining population is necessarily in and of itself a massive problem for society, nor is the fact that we have a temporary problem with an aging population, which is a consequence of the baby boom generation, obviously. That's just a temporary issue that will naturally solve itself, because these people will, in 10 years, 15 years time, will pass away. So but this is the general point that the UN makes. We need replacement migration to replace the indigenous populations of the West. And I think that there's a very insidious globalist agenda there behind it, which I've termed the attack on the nation state in one of my books, which is the ideology that we need to move beyond national identity. We need to move beyond this idea that in France, primarily French people live, in Germany, and and to get into this stage of universal mankind, that we're all essentially the same, we're all going to blend together, and that's just it's not true. It's proven not true. We see the third, fourth generation immigrants; they're still significantly separate from the original population.
Oh, but you know that's the white man's fault. You didn't know that? That's the original population's fault.
Institutional racism.
Of course, yeah. There's always
you cannot be multicultural in Saudi Arabia.
Of course not.
It's a unicultural phenomenon. Multiculturalism is a unicultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
And it's essentially used to suppress national populations, and also, and this is very important to understand, I think, if there's a strong community with a certain history, a particular culture, it's far more difficult to govern people, to rule people from above. If people are atomized, if they're all in their individual homes, they don't recognize the street, they don't have this sense of shared culture and shared community with their neighbors, then obviously they're going to look at the state or supranational bodies, and they're like, okay, give me my welfare, arrange everything for me. I don't feel at home anymore, anywhere. I don't have anything to protect. I don't have any heritage that I'm proud of.
This is extremely important. I tweeted something the other day, and I think it went over a lot of people's heads. And I said, if you love yourself and you love seeing things similar to yourself out in the world, people who look like you, think like you, speak the same language as you, to a degree, you're going to be racist. I tweeted that, and people were like, what do you mean? Because it's Twitter. But I think the point I was trying to make, and you just highlighted there perfectly, is that they fear native populations, especially men, loving anything at all. They talk about hate all the time, but really what they're afraid of is love, not hate. They don't want you to love your nation. They don't want you to love the street you grew up on. They don't want you to love your language. They don't want you to love your people. They don't want you to love the town you're from. Because if you love those things, you're prepared to stand up for them and defend them. And you're prepared to say, I don't want X to happen here. You can do that over there, but I grew up here. And they'll call you a hateful person for that, but it's nothing to do with hate. It's actually to do with love. They want you to love nothing at all. So when you talk about the itemization, that's perfect. They want you to not know who your neighbor is, not care where you live. Every street looks the same. That's why they build all the buildings to look the same.
Yes.
Not care what you eat, not care about anything. Sit there, self-obsessed, semi-depressed, playing video games, so they can get away with whatever they want because there's no love at all inside of you. And they try very hard. This is one of the biggest tricks media do. Every single time they talk about someone being a hateful person, and they do it with all of the right-wingers and all the nationalists. They say he's hateful. If you look at what they say he hates whatever, LGBT, for example. Really, what you do is you love your family.
Yeah.
It's actually love-based, but they inverse it and attack you with virtue.
It's Orwell.
100%.
It's ignorance is war is peace, love is hate. It's the inversion of reality, and that's what I admire in you, and that's what I think a huge shout out to you is really in place. That you've given an entire generation of young men, I think especially, but also women, I'm sure, this sense of pride. You take care of your body, make sure you start a business, take care of your family, be proud of your inheritance, your history, your nation's history, be knowledgeable about that history. And don't just take the things that the media tell you that everything that happened in the past was wrong and bad. No, we've done great things, and that's really a massive cultural influence that you've had, and I think you still have, and I think that's also why they're so afraid of you, and why they try to label you as someone who hates women. I hear that all the time, and I think you're just bragging sometimes, but in fact, I think what you think is important is the protection of women and their celebration.
Once again, they say I hate women because I believe women should be protected. So they'll say, he's a misogynist and he hates women because he says women are weak.
Yes.
And once again, it's exactly that. You know, they've used a lot of attacks on me. I've been called homophobic, I've been called misogynistic, etc. But they can't really pin racism on me because I'm mixed race. So it allows me to make racial observations that most people can't say and survive. But I can say it and survive. But I often, when I speak to white people in general, because half of my family's white, half of my family's black, white people are the only people on the planet currently being psyoped into hating themselves and hating their history and giving away their positions of power in their own nations to foreigners. You will not go to Saudi Arabia and see anyone other than an Arab in charge. You can go there and you can visit and you can live and you can make money, you can enjoy the country. But when it comes to positions of power, they're going to be born in Saudi Arabia and they're going to speak Arabic. You're not going to have anything else. And it's the same in China, it's the same in Russia, it's the same in most countries. It's only the white Christian, the Western Christian, and the white people who have been psyoped into thinking they're so terribly evil.
And that's because of cultural Marxism.
Okay, for building the modern world, by the way. And they can come at me and attack me all they want because my father's black. This is just an objective proof. You know what's actually funny? I've had more bigotry aimed at me for being a straight, light-skinned male than I ever have for being black. So I get more problems being straight and white than I've ever had getting black. But the point is, the white person, a large contingent of the white population, is not proud of anything their ancestors have ever done. And that's truly terrible when we talk about how beautiful Europe is, and we talk about all the culture that comes from Europe and the beautiful countries that exist inside of Europe. It is deliberately done so that white people will sit there and accept it. They want mass replacement of populace. And Europe won't be European anymore if you change all of the people inside of Europe. Everything you love about Europe and the culture and the way you want it to feel and the things you expect to see and the things you want your children to learn, all of it is going to disappear when you change all of the people in real time. And this goes back into the spider web of ideas and how they're all interconnected. But then you talk about, well, how do you fight against having your population replaced? There's a lot of ways you can do that, and immigration law is one thing, but you need to have children also. And now we have native populations that aren't having large families. We can talk about whether they can afford it or not, or whether people aren't getting married anymore, and there's all these other completely separate debates which tie into it.
And people can't get a proper house.
People can't get a house, that's right. But if you have, I mean, imagine the cuckoldry. And I don't want to offend people, I do, because that's how I motivate people, by pissing them off. But imagine the cuckoldry of sitting there as a native populace and working hard to pay taxes, to invite in people who do not even like you or think like you or look like you, and paying for them to have as many children as possible in your hometown. Like, what kind of pussy does that make you? And that's what we have, and this is a global phenomenon happening in Europe for the first time in history ever. No other populations ever put up with this shit, ever. And we're sitting here going, well, I mean, I'm just observing. I mean, I guess I'm brown enough. I can move to Algeria and I'll get away with it. I don't know. I'm just sitting here. I'm pointing out the obvious.
Where would I go?
I don't know, bro. Nice knowing you. I'm just pointing out the obvious to people. And I made a Twitter post about it. Everyone got super upset with me and super butthurt that I said that they need to have more kids. But I think that that's a solution. And a lot of that does come down to governance, like you said, about proper housings and these kind of things. So besides... And I know Orban, people have mixed views on him, but are there any other European leaders who even address native population, native birth rates, or is there any other European leader who wants native people to have more children?
I think there are party leaders like me, but I don't think there's actually a government leader. No, I think that's right.
So we're talking about, I mean, you just told me I'm flabbergasted. They're going to put 500 meters of concrete on top of a gas field. So you're talking about a continent now, which is important to people who need to be paid for to outpopulate the local populace, and committing energy suicide in real time.
But that's why it's so important that we address this issue, because ultimately it comes down to mindset. We have been brainwashed into believing that all these things are super important, and that if somebody can be accused of X, Y, Z, all these different names that they call each other and they call us, that it's too scary to associate with someone. And because we are so scared as a population, we get bullied into voting for politicians and you know, accepting that our statues are being brought down and accepting all these ridiculous things. So ultimately, it comes down to mindset. Ultimately, we have to win the fight for the hearts and minds of the people. And in that way, I think cultural Marxism was far more pervasive than economic Marxism. There's something about it. So after the war, Eastern Europe became subjected by economic Marxism, obviously, but it didn't touch the soul of the people. And I think there's still a lot of cultural strength and identity strength in the east of Europe. Yeah. You can also tell from AFD, the alternative from Germany, that's a patriotic party. The people that are members of that party from Eastern Germany are far more right-wing and strong and sort of and self-confident. They're like, no, we don't want our country to perish. And then the Germans of Western Germany, of course, having been subjected to decades of cultural Marxism rather than economic Marxism, they are self-hating and they're full of this shame and this sense of guilt. And we really need to get over that. We really need to start concluding that on balance, European civilization has been great. We have so much to be proud of. We must find our way back to defending ourselves. Otherwise, something will be lost. But the fight for the children is definitely very much a part of that. And I've recently become a proud father, and I really hope for all the audience to experience that too.
So I've got some videos and stuff I want to play here. Before we do that, this is just a generalized law. I mean, we can apply it to Europe in our current conversation. You can apply it to most other things. I guess my view of the universe and my view of life is that people who care more win. I don't even think it's about competence as much as simply care.
Yeah.
If there is a contingent of the populace who believed 2 + 2 = 5, and they were ready to murder for it, and they were ready to die for it, and there was enough of them, and they wouldn't give up, sooner or later there'd be books being printed with this new area of mathematics trying to justify 2 + 2 = 5, or something else as ridiculous as a man having children, for example.
Yeah.
If you have a large contingent of the population who just care, no matter how wrong they are, if they're psychopathic in their intolerance, they seem to get somewhere. So I guess when we look at certain things, and I know I've reverted to Islam, and I have this conversation often because I'm a right-wing guy, and I talk about how I want to preserve cultures, but I've reverted to Islam, and people often ask me if there's a juxtaposition between those two things, and I say, there seems to be a big, problem with Islam, and I understand how Islam is not seen as natively European, and I understand how a lot of people who are invading the countries are seen as Islamic. I understand all of these things. My overall view of these things are, if you're going to invite in people who care more about their religion than the native populace care about their own religion, then you're going to end up being hard to care. And I guess if I had to analyze,
You want them to care about Christianity?
Well, I want them to care about themselves and their family. And I guess this is why I've been so heavily attacked, because when I try and inspire bravery inside of young men, just as you said, if a man goes to the gym and he starts to look after himself, and he has a wife, and he wants to be the head of the household, and he wants to make money, and he wants to care about that house, and then by extension he cares about the community, and he has a kid, so he cares about the school, then he cares about the safety, a huge degree of apathy amongst the populace. I have conversations with people, and they'll sit and say, I don't want to talk about politics. This is your life. This is your country. This is your town. What do you mean you don't want to talk about it? You just want to sit here and die? So how do we, I've been doing my very best by pissing everyone off by insulting them, and also trying to inspire them to be as brave as possible. But what else can we do? And maybe voting is the answer. Maybe I should, and I self-analyze, stop saying that the whole system's rigged. Rigged or not, if you go stand in line and vote, when it's rigged, you'll be more pissed off they rigged it. So at least you should go and vote. So we need to get the native populations to start caring, because when you invite in people who care more than you, and they care more about simply having kids and getting free money than you care about stopping them, they're going to get it. They're going to get it.
Yeah, and there's our opponents are fanatic about it. And I brought one clip that I would like to show to you. But before that, I have a question to you. Sure. What is non-binary?
Well, are we talking about in the LGBT insane term? Or
exactly.
Yeah.
Not in the mathematical term.
I actually have a theory. I have a theory for these people. I think these people are just slightly mentally ill. I think they have narcissism. I think they're desperate to have some degree of individuality in a world where they don't have the capability to win any type of merit. Yeah. So they want to be exceptional. They want to stand out. They want to be different from the crowd, but there's nothing exceptional about them. They're not prepared to work hard. They're not prepared to learn anything. They're not prepared to build anything. They don't want to do anything difficult. So they say, how do I gain individuality within this meritocracy without doing any work at all? Well, why don't I just start talking bullshit? Even if people argue with me, people are at least paying attention to me. And I think it's just attention seeking at the highest level.
But listen to this. In the Netherlands, from 11 years onwards, it's legal to give people hormone blockers and puberty disturbers, so they get sterilized effectively and they can start their transitioning earlier. It's called the Dutch method, something that the Dutch are proud of, or some in the Netherlands. A lot of people oppose it, obviously and luckily. But from 11 onwards, people are transitioning now. And this is what they show in schools. This is an actual official school TV clip where they have this show, and they show to young people, they show the following.
Nadat je een operatie hebt gehad. Anne-Chris, hoe voel je dat?
Ken je het woord euforisch?
Nee.
Oké, dat is echt heel blij. Echt heel blij. Ik werd wakker en ik wist dat ik geen borst meer had, dat het plat was, dat het was zoals ik altijd heb gewild, zoals ik me van binnen voel. Ik was echt tot het plafond, zeg maar door het plafond floten.
Het is een soort van dat je vliegt.
Ja.
Ja, ik ben dan gewoon super blij.
Dat wil ik ook.
They're almost naked in front of 9-year-old children, 10-year-old children.
Right, I'm not a politician, so I can give a non-politically correct answer, right?
It makes me very angry.
Oh, of course, because what they're doing is they are trying to psyop the next generation for their movement. These
Yeah.
people cannot have children, so they need your kids. They're coming for your kids. And this is the thing I highlight so often. If you want to do whatever in a private bedroom amongst yourself, then you can do that. That's fine. That gives you no right whatsoever to go to somebody else's child who they're paying to raise, who they're struggling to afford, and try and psyop their child. I have children, so they're a representative of me, with my morals and my backbone and my views of the world, not for them to be yours. If you decided to have a type of sex which prevents you from recreating, that's your problem. It's not my problem. But they do all of this on purpose because they don't have a future of a movement unless they get straight people's kids. Because straight people have kids. So they have to get the straight people's kids and psyop them to the other side. So all of this is very deliberate. And when you have an idea or you have an ideology that you have to deliberately aim at children because children are the most susceptible, that shows that you're wrong. You can't come along to adult people who have lived a full life and start talking about the fact that you're non-binary. Because then you're laughed out the room. So you have to go to children who believe in rainbows and Santa Claus and everything else that's garbage.
And here's the thing, because we now have an economy, because of climate change, because of mass immigration, because of taxation, where both parents have to work, in most cases, normal cases, the children are in school all the time, or they're in government institutions. So they're really, there's nothing in between them anymore. And that's, my party is the only party in the Netherlands to address this, but that's also what we want to bring to the European Parliament, because this comes from up high. This is an international movement.
Yeah, and you're raised by the state. The children are raised by the state now. And this comes down to the atomization once again. If you're going to allow them to psyop your children with things that you don't even believe in, and you're going to sit there and go, oh, well, the world's progressive. I guess things changed. They learn it in school. No big deal. I was busy at work and I don't want to watch TV. If you don't care about your own children's minds, then you're certainly not going to care about the political party that's ruling you. You don't care about anything at that point. That's fully slave-minded.
Yeah.
But it's very scary.
They're too busy with surviving.
You're too busy with watching Kardashians or whatever you're doing, or paying your bills.
Yeah.
You're right. And this is what's so scary about it, but they deliberately aim for children and they deliberately want your kids. You have to keep this in mind. They're trying to turn your children gay all day, every day. That's what they're trying to do. And that's scary, especially for me. Even if you remove the ideological aspect of it, even if you remove the fact that I will be angered that another party, another movement has come along and hijacked the mind of the child that I pay for, that I struggle for, that I created. What's even worse than that is that ends my dynasty. That ends my genetic bloodline. So I'm going to struggle out here trying to make as much money as possible to have children, to raise them, to protect them, to worry about them at night, to make sure they don't get out too late and don't get stabbed on these crazy streets, just for someone to come along and psyop them and inject them with slave programming so that I don't get grandchildren, so that some other gay dude later down the line has something to fuck. It's insanity. And they're coming for our kids. And if that's not going to wake people up, then I don't know what is. But they come along with these words like homophobic, and they call you hateful. They call you hateful for caring about your own genetic bloodline. No, you actually are full of love. You love your children. So don't let anyone call you hateful. That's the biggest trick of them all. They say, oh, you're hateful against the LGBT. There's no hate in me. I just love my children and I want to protect them. If you love something, you're ready to protect it. They can call you hateful against what you're protecting them from all you want. But it's truthfully people full of love who care about their bloodline and care about their children.
But why is it so difficult to get people to see this fundamental truth and to get going? This apathy you just mentioned, I do think that's the disease of Europe and perhaps even of America and maybe lots of other people, I don't know. But I see it all around me. I so often encounter a regular guy in a shop or a taxi driver or somebody I meet in the street, and he says, yeah, you're the only honest guy in politics. I'm like, thank you. Are you going to vote for me? No, man, I don't believe in politics anymore. Yeah. Or maybe it's not even just voting, but for example, we set up a school. Yep. We set up a proper school without all this stuff, all this indoctrination. And it's very hard to get people to donate for it. Yep. And I see people on Twitter like, oh, there's Thierry again asking for donations. Doesn't he make enough money being a member of parliament? As if I had to pay for the entire school myself, things like that. There's this particular anger perhaps or unwillingness to engage, and I think it's to do with what you've just been saying, because if you engage, you're likely to get frustrated. You may fail, and that's a fear. And rather than taking the jump and accepting the possibility of failure, the people stay on their couch and they're like, okay, whatever, I'll comment on social media and I'll tell him when I see him that I like what he does, and then it's not my life. So it's a coping strategy, I think, and 100%. That's the level of demoralization we've already reached, and that's what you've been trying to do. That's what I admire about you, and I also try to do that myself in my particular way. We need to get people to care, to be remoralized.
Yeah, completely.
How do you go back from demoralization to remoralization?
And the
that's the question in my mind all the time.
You're right, and the demoralization is so intense and so great that people don't care about their own children or their own culture anymore.
Yeah.
And it's truly incredible. And I think you nailed it. You put it absolutely correct there. People are afraid of accepting there's a problem because then they know they have a responsibility.
Yeah, then you got
fixing
to
it.
do something.
Then you have to do something.
Yeah.
And they don't want to do anything, one, because they're lazy, and two, because they're afraid they might lose. So they'd rather pretend there's no problem at all. And I think I often say to people in a lot of my videos about a lot of other subjects that it's not always the winning and the losing. It's the fighting in the first place.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of men in history you remember who ended up losing in the end. Napoleon, for example. I can name the hundreds who still fought, which is why they mattered. It's not, if you're only going to fight when you're guaranteed to win, then no bravery is required. If I go into the boxing ring and I get to fight and it's all rigged, I don't need bravery, right? If I know that I'm going to win no matter what, there's no bravery. It's the possibility you may lose.
Yeah.
And this is what we need to do: is stop getting people obsessed with the idea of winning and just get them obsessed with the idea of fighting in the first place because it's the right thing to do. You have to fight because it's the right thing to do and because God is watching. And you have to fight so that you can look back on your life and feel happy that you tried to do something when you knew it was going on before it was too late.
Exactly.
Stop sitting there saying, well, we don't stand a chance of winning. Forget about the winning and losing for now. Focus on the fight. Because there's a lot of people who love winning who do certain things, but they're never going to be as capable as the people who simply love fighting. The best fighters out there don't think about win or lose. They just want to hurt people. And those are the dangerous ones.
And there's a flip side to the fact that we can safely conclude that politicians are quite opportunistic and simply going with the flow, and they're interested in power and they do whatever is asked from them. And the deep state is the same. If we form a very motivated group, even if it's a small battalion in a way, then we can have a massive influence.
Absolutely.
That's what history has taught me. If you look at the Roman Empire, or you think of the Renaissance movement, or even the early Christian movement, or perhaps Islam today, these are people that are very deeply serious. They care about what they believe in, and they can manifest themselves, and they can be far more influential than you would think from mere numbers or statistics. It's motivation.
I would love to see a flip in the culture, because the two most infectious emotions on the planet are both cowardice and bravery.
Yeah.
If you have an army charging at the enemy and two guys see that they're charging to their certain death and they stop and turn around and start running the other way, two guys of thousands, everybody will turn away. But if everybody's running and nobody stops, you'll keep running. So cowardice and bravery are the two most infectious emotions amongst humanity. And I feel like we've been living under the cowardice, and the cowardice is infectious. I meet people all the time who come to me and say, Andrew, I love everything you say, especially women. I love everything you say. You're not misogynist. I love everything you say. But at work, I don't say anything because what?
Yeah.
Well, because what? Why don't you just say, I like what he says? They're not going to fire you. Like, the people are so scared. The cowardice has been so infectious. And hopefully if we hit an inflection point and it tips, and it starts going the other way, the bravery becomes massively infectious. Because one of the good things about the position we're in is that we're operating from a realm of truth. And truth is brilliant because truth doesn't require much energy to propagate. If you tell the truth, you can just say, here's the facts, here's the truth, enjoy.
This is what I believe.
This is what I believe, done. And here's what's happening. You can see it yourself, done. But when you tell lies, you need unlimited energy to keep these lies alive. You have to repeat the lies every single day on every single news outlet, constantly and endlessly. We're winning because we're more efficient than they are. They can lie 1 trillion times, but if you tell the truth once and people stop being cowards, it's over. The lies don't work anymore.
But there's one thing we should add to that, and that's short memory span of people. It's only 2 years ago that we were all locked down.
Yeah.
Can you just remember how ridiculous that was? And I remember I was in Dubai at the time. That was January 2022. So that's almost the very end. And I genuinely believed that this was going to be forever.
Yep.
And that's what people were told. That's what the world is never going to be the same. We're never going back. The fourth shot was on its way, whatever. And of course, I'm not vaccinated at all, and I hope you guys are not either, because it's not good for you to shot.
Yep.
But and then they shifted it. Something else came on the agenda, and now
people cured COVID.
right. So now it's all. So the COVID, the masks were replaced by flags from Ukraine, and so there's this tendency of completely focusing public debate on some issue and then shifting to something else when they're losing the narrative. And I think that's also something that our movement should do. Is we should force them to look back on the facts and
we should
be
keep a track
confronted
record. We should keep a track record, and we should bring it up. If you make it into Parliament, sir, I hope you mention the COVID vaccine every single day.
Exactly.
Don't let them off.
Yeah.
No, we're not forgetting about what you did.
Yeah.
No, we're not forgetting about you. Why are you not wearing a mask? Where's your vaccine passport?
Exactly.
I remind all the BBC reporters that come in here every single time I ask for their vaccine passports. Every single one of them. You clowns were trying to convince people to get a poison shot.
That's great.
And you're right. We let them off because they distract us with new issues and they come along. And that's actually one of the things I caught myself in a conundrum a few times. Sometimes I find myself arguing about certain things and I wonder if I'm falling into their trap, because when they do something as obviously ridiculous and asinine as allowing women to have to compete against transgender men in their sports, for example, I sit and say, is this just a trick so that I talk about that instead of talk about the fact that they're killing innocents all around the world, the military-industrial complex, the deep state, the elections are fake? Are they distracting me with this complete clown show? Are they putting clowns in the way so I'm mad at the clowns? Because they're hitting us with so much garbage. And I guess that's where it comes back to what we were saying earlier about love and having to love who you are and loving your culture and loving the people around you and being a proud man. And I think a lot of this comes into physicality as well. The reason I teach all of my students, and then when I'm home, I say, go to the gym, get strong, train, whatever. You need to have a degree of bravery to stand up for. If you stand up for yourself, you're going to stand up for those you love, and you're going to be a lot harder to psyop, and that's easier to do when you feel strong. Even if it has no actual tangible benefit in politics. If you feel strong, you're tall enough, you feel strong, you walk in there and say, listen, midgets. that's the reality of the world. And I think that that's extremely important. I'm going to cut the Twitter feed now, and we're going to go exclusively to Rumble.
That's one. That some teaser for the Twitter people. We're going to show a school book that they're giving to children from 6 years onwards in schools in the Netherlands, and they've got some interesting pages on certain sexual activities.
Yeah, so you can find us exclusively on Rumble at Tate Speech. While the guys from Twitter move over, everybody, I'm going to remind you: do not drink coffee that makes you gay. Do not drink Starbucks or any of that junk. You can drink 1775 coffee. They support Rumble, and Rumble supports us and allows us to tell you the truth at home.
And I must say that having had a cups of coffee here, it tastes fantastic.
Yeah,
so it's really worthwhile trying.
It's very good, and I promise it won't turn you gay like Starbucks will. So let's find this book then. There's the TV show.
Book, higher.
Ah, there we go. Over. In the meantime, let's talk about this very quickly before we move on, because it's loaded up.
Fertility rate, yeah.
The global fertility rates and how this affects the world.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is trouble for the European populace.
Yeah, definitely.
4 and higher all across Africa. So the next 100 years are going to see massively expanding populations. And this ties also into politics, because I often see when I have arguments or I have discussions on podcasts, when you talk to the leftists who are emotionally based and they operate from an emotional standpoint, not a logical standpoint, they say, well, these people need opportunities, these people need help. You can't help all of them. They're outbreeding to the point where we can't simply let them in as quick as they can create new ones. It doesn't matter if you let in 1,000 or 100,000 or 10 million. These countries will still be full of people who don't have the opportunities that exist in a European nation because of the population expansion. So why would you let any in at all? Because it doesn't even fix the problem of these nations. The idea you can just let everyone in and the world's gonna be a better place is crazy. It doesn't even work.
Yeah.
And then also, I guess there's another argument, is that it's probably their most energetic that are trying to escape. It's the people who would have the most energy to go and, I don't know, build a dam or build a bridge or be the bravest who are getting on these teams in the first place. Yeah. They're strongest military-age males to end up homeless on the streets of Paris.
We need to be very, very strong character and also in other ways to defend ourselves, protect ourselves against this.
So
That's clear. Because I don't see any way around that argument, that point. I conceded immediately. This looks very, very bleak for us, but it's the situation we're in, and nothing we can do right now other than protect ourselves and become strong and start families and be aware of who we are. And well, that's the thing.
So before we get the book clips, I have to change the format quickly. I have another question. I mean, and I don't want to get you into any kind of political hot water, but when I put out that tweet talking about the fact that white people need to have more children, everyone's talking about mass deportations, blah, blah, blah. Do we agree that that's unlikely, or do you think that's not even a possibility in the modern world?
Well, one thing that might happen is that the indigenous Europeans will move to a particular place. That's also possible.
That would be interesting. Should I say something that's going to get me in a lot of trouble? I'll say it anyway. Don't care. I say something that's going to get me in a lot of trouble. I was talking to someone the other day, and I was saying that we were talking about, I can't remember in the conversation, and I said, there's 1 billion people in India, I think.
Something like
that. I said, imagine there was 1 billion Norwegians. 1 billion.
Yeah, that'd be great.
No, but imagine the world. I'm not saying anything racist. I'm just imagine there's Norway with a strong border, a wall, and 1 billion of them. They'd be on the moon, they'd be on Mars, they'd be on Saturn, they'd be doing everything. Absolutely insane what could exist with genuine population dynamics. But then you go down, because all of these ideas are so interlinked. It's so interesting. When you look at the push to, like you said, the currency's so inflated now that both parents have to work. It's unfair to expect a woman or a mother to have a huge number of kids if she's also having to work a job to pay the rent.
Yeah.
So then it goes down into the whole monetary policy. It goes into the fact that nobody can afford to ever support themselves anymore. So there's so many interlocking ideas. It's super interesting. It's hard to find a solution for all of it.
But the question of migration and deportation and relocation and remigration, I think that the future is going to see islands. We're going either literal islands or just gated communities, and that's a very sad thing because I think living standards.
Don't they already exist? Basically, I mean, I'll just talk about England, the country I'm from. Most of the major cities have fallen, which is sad to see. There's areas of London which are better than others, but even the nice areas of London are starting to fall now.
So people move.
They move to the countryside.
Exactly, and then they'll have protected neighborhoods, they have private security, and that's very much the way Europe looked in the Middle Ages. So that the analogy with the fall of the Roman Empire here, I think, applies pretty much. In the Middle Ages, you had cities that were gated walls, and that's where the people lived who wanted to be protected against, people from other parts of that.
I have another question for you. First, I'm going to play some clips for you, and then I have a question for you. So first, we're going to play this clip here. This is a German politician, perhaps a colleague of yours, your mate.
Do I have to watch all of this, Andrew?
I think so. For the integrity of the show, sir. This is a German politician.
Massive drop in views right now.
German politician.
Oh man, this is so degenerate.
Oh, we
this
got
is
another
so
one. Don't worry.
retarded.
We got another one. Here we go. I think he's on the Quran here.
What's he doing?
I'm not entirely sure.
He jetting off?
I think so. And then, I don't want to be.
And that's a politician.
That's a politician. That's right.
I wouldn't vote for that.
And then we have. Let's move on. That's Germany. Let's move on to Spain. We have this guy from Spain.
Oh, it's a German national anthem, so it's also insulting to the nation. That's probably part of why he likes it. He likes the.
So we have this gay Spanish politician who's involved in such activities. And then I thought, I don't want to I know we're talking about Europe here, but why not? Let me just throw it.
Eating his own feces.
That's right. Let me just throw in America. Let me just throw in America for good measure. Because we've stopped talking about this now. Only a month ago or so, gay sex was caught inside of the Senate, inside of the most powerful building in the most powerful nation on the planet. No investigation, no arrests, no jail, nothing. Just like, oopsie doopsie, don't talk about it anymore. And then they just let him get away with it. So I guess my question is, why do all these gay weirdos end up in power? How deep down the rabbit hole are you prepared to go, sir? How do all these gay weirdos end up in power? Are they put in power deliberately because they can be blackmailed into doing whatever people in charge really want them to do? Is it bad luck? Like, how do these absolute degenerate weirdos end up in power, and how do they get away with doing all this degenerate stuff without anything else happening to them? Because if you're a right-wing politician and you sneeze near a girl, you're a rapist. But these people can have gay sex in the Senate and nothing at all happens. There's not even an investigation. They just talk about their innocence. I'm like, oh, I want to know how we ended up ruled a bunch of intent on destroying every single nation they covered and hurting everyone's kids dead.
Well,
hope you enjoy remaining jail.
I'll say that in all these images that we've just seen in you see this sense of looking down on all the institutions of the nation, like, okay, look how much I can degrade it, and that's of course fits in perfectly with the cultural Marxist ideology, but it's not pretty.
I guess it's just trying to understand how these people get in power in the first place and who lets them into power, and if these choices are deliberate. Like, is there a deliberate decision to allow these types of people into power in the first place? Because it can't be a coincidence that nearly every single time someone who makes these crazy, insane policies appears in a government, they end up having some huge skeleton in their closet.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Or is it just me being paranoid?
In addition, the full client list of Jeffrey Epstein has not been released yet either, has it?
I'll tell you something else that's very interesting. Do you know who was arrested on the day that certain things were released by Epstein? His island, there's certain things about his island were released. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was me and my brother. So when you typed in human trafficking, all you could see was my brother and I's face. And I think it was Ghislaine Maxwell, the day they put her in jail,
wow.
Arrested, yeah. So if you want to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole, there's an interesting one.
Wow.
Very interesting one. And then I think that's one more thing to talk about. I'd actually like to talk about that before we show the book, because we finally got the book working here. So before we talk about that, I want to explain something to the people at home. That I think we're currently living in the middle of a war, and the war is a battle for influence. And I think all wars,
information wars.
Yeah, all wars have been about for influence. The reason you send tanks into a population or into an area is so that you can control the people within that area and make them use the currency you say and listen to the media you say and you say. It's an information war. You can use tanks to do it. You can silence by the media machine. It doesn't matter. You're trying to get a huge degree of control over a certain populace to make sure they adhere to certain ideals. You send tanks into Ukraine or you send tanks to Georgia or wherever. You're trying to make the local population agree with your ideals by force. And we're currently there. We're in a situation where you have enough. If you're fighting against them and you're saying things that prevent their slave programming working on certain people, you're an enemy combatant. You're an enemy combatant, as am I. The people who are trying to side off the population are sitting at home going, we're trying to tell this crazy idea. They don't believe me. And they don't believe me because they're listening to this guy. He's an enemy soldier. So he must pay the price.
Exactly.
So that's why I ended up in jail. That's how it works. You can't upset these people too tough before they use the only mechanism they have, which is the legal system, to find a way to wreck you. And that's what's so upsetting when you understand that.
That's also how I knew that you were innocent, by the way. The way the prosecution went about it, I was trying to think logically, okay, if these guys or this guy, whatever, has done anything seriously, then what you do is you write a letter, you say, can we have a conversation? And that you don't take rolling cameras, driving people out of their homes. That's a psyop. You can tell from the way they go about, and that's also why I stood up in favor to defend you in Parliament. We hadn't that yet. I didn't know your case. Now I know a lot more. Stories years and years back, and I hear say, and he pushed me. But I knew from the way they went about it, and I think that modus operandi, that's the kind of sensitivity people need to start developing. You know there's something going on when it doesn't add up.
And that meant the world to us.
Logical.
That meant the world to us. No, you nailed it. Like they brought cameras to our arrest. They filmed the whole thing for the media. It was a smear campaign. It was a hit job. And the goal was to damage our influence because we're in a battle of influence. It's all an information war, which is why they try and censor speech.
That's why they don't censor pedophile content on YouTube.
No.
But you are censoring.
That
doesn't make any sense.
Of course. Because we're in an information war. It's constantly an information war. And that ties perfectly into this book that you're talking about here in the video. Let me load it up and play it, because I've yet to see this book myself.
Oh yeah, this is a book that is distributed in schools. It's for children, and it shows these illustrations. You can see if you zoom in a little bit, illustrations of fellatio and other explicit things. Oh, it's from 4 years on. And you have this week of the spring excitement, spring awakening, where all these things are taught, and people they have a Purple Friday where children get to dress. If they're a boy, they get to dress as a girl, or they get these questions to ask at home to their father. Why did you raise me as a boy, or why did you raise me as a girl, rather than am I a boy or am I a girl? So this just brings us back to the cultural Marxist structure that is already injected from lower education onwards, which is really pervasive now in the Netherlands. And I think this is a European problem. It's coming to other European countries as well. I'm sure it's coming to the US as well. And only if we set up private schools and if we build networks of people that are not willing to accept this, and parents that are addressing the issues to their school directors and the headmasters of schools, can we push back.
I completely agree. And I think as we conclude, I think the people at home need to understand that the core of the existence of the European peoples, especially the Caucasian peoples, is being attacked to the point where they are attacking the most fundamental truths that exist. Not only are they attacking every single thing about your history you've ever done, it's all been wrong, it's all been bad.
Yeah.
All the cathedrals you've built, all the inventions, all the medicine, all the science, all of the philosophy, all the astronomy, all of it was all bad. Every single thing bad happened because of white people. Nobody else did anything bad ever. The Arabs didn't take slaves. There weren't already slave trades in Africa before the white man got there. None of this has ever happened. Of course, it's all the white people. So they're attacking your entire history. And now they're attacking things as fundamental as the biology of a man and a woman. And what they're trying to do is remove the baseline foundations. If you have a building, if you have a culture, or you have a peoples, and you look at it like a skyscraper, if you take out foundational blocks, the whole thing's going to crumble.
Yeah.
So they've just come along and they're like, well, if we can get them arguing about and confused about whether they're even girls or not,
But it's very odd, especially when you talk to boomers, how brainwashed they are and how difficult it is to get them to actually stand up for themselves. And it scares me a lot that people in our countries are so sensitive to that.
Yeah,
it's very weird. It's very odd, don't you think?
It is odd, because I think it would be nearly impossible to go to nearly any other nation. Let me choose a random nation, Kyrgyzstan. I'm sure in Kyrgyzstan there is a particular tribe in Kyrgyzstan that I can't even name. And if you were to go to them and try and convince them they're bad people, they would laugh you out the room. They'd probably shoot you. They'd be like, we're not going to hear, we don't care what you say about us. This is who we are. And you couldn't convince the Kyrgyz people anything otherwise. But you're right. The Western European is so susceptible to it. And I think it's because their psyche is under such constant bombardment. The fact that men are not allowed to be men or do anything masculine at all, and then there's constant sex, and then there's constant entertainment, and constant garbage flooded their way, constant distraction, plus you add in the doom and gloom of the current financial status and system, which I think is a big part of it. There's a large portion of men especially who wake up and sit and think, unless I get lucky gambling on some crypto coin, I'm never going to be able to afford a house. Yeah. I'm never going to be able to afford a wife because most of these women want the Instagram life. They're all with Tristan Tate. I can't afford to deal with a woman like this. So I can't get a wife. I can't get a house. So why do I care about the country? Why do I care about the society anymore if I don't stand a chance of even having a family within it?
But I'm not sure if we've addressed this enough, but that's also what's at stake in the war in Ukraine. Because Russia is the last European country to resist to this cultural Marxist movement, and Putin is attempting to be a traditionalist European leader. And the very day that the fighting started in Ukraine, the then head of MI6, Richard Moore, tweeted that we being the West or the collective West or NATO or whatever, we are fighting this war to protect our values. Most important amongst them being LGBT rights. And that's also why NATO set up an LGBT regiment, which is actually fighting in Ukraine, or perhaps not fighting, but taking care of other things, I don't know, but they are there. They have uniforms, they have a website, you can Google it, LGBT Regiment NATO or something like that, you'll find it. And this is very much, so the LGBT is very much the core of the cultural Marxist agenda, and it's also what bullets are being fired over, and this is what's been at stake with all the color revolutions. Have you ever wondered why they did the color? Yeah, that's the flag, right? So there's this geopolitics and micropolitics as comes across the family questions. They are very, very much connected right now, and that's also, again, I repeat myself, but that's why it matters so much that you go out, because this really is a moment of choice at the crossing where young men might be set to the front to fight for
which is absolutely right.
Fighting back to
about the homosexual and we just play clips of how to manage into power. You're right. And even more serious, I think America's losing this war in Ukraine accelerated that. I think they made a mistake. Before this war in Ukraine, America used to make the phone call. Most of the world complied. I'm tired of them.
Yeah.
When America makes a phone call, Europe will commit suicide on command. If they say do this with your monetary policy, even though it's going to damage the people inside of your country, they'll sit and go, yes, sir, and they'll do it anyway because none of the European leaders have a backbone. But most of the world now, South America, Africa, the Middle East, China, especially Asia, everyone's just ignoring the phone calls.
Yes.
So America's got one vassal state left, which is the EU and NATO, which is just going to implode to save the mothership. If you look at the fall of Rome, this is what when Rome started running out of money, they bankrupted Spain to save Rome. So Europe is going to burn before America does, and they're doing it on purpose, and they know, and the globalists don't care because they can make as much money as possible, get on a private jet and move somewhere else anyway.
And private jets are exempt from the carbon tax.
Of course they are.
Just like super yachts.
I would know. So yeah, we're living in a very dangerous, precarious scenario now, and I guess I hope if something as insane as a draft for the front line were to happen, that would cause the mass revolution we finally need for people at home to understand what's going on.
Peaceful and democratic revolution.
Peaceful and democratic, of course, because we have the right to have peaceful protest, of course. And it's really insane that the people who are in charge of the countries we're living in don't have any interest in the people they're governing at all.
Yeah.
And it's been a very interesting conversation. I feel like we need a part 2 sometime soon because
I love that.
There's so much more I can talk about.
But after the elections, guys, don't forget to vote in the Netherlands on June 6th for Forum for Democracy, and in the other countries where you're in for the most radical, traditionalist, Europe-loving, serious party you can find.
Guys, I'm going to make an official declaration. I've changed one of my opinions because I used to say the whole democratic system's corrupt and it's all run by money and the whole elections are rigged, etc. And I'm not going to say I was wrong, but I will say this. that if everybody goes and votes for the truth, it makes their job a lot harder. If we're all apathetic and we all sit at home, it becomes a lot easier for them to rig it. But if everybody you've ever seen has voted for the one guy who's doing the right thing, he somehow doesn't win, then their job becomes a lot harder. Because truthfully, we talk about these people having control, we talk about the elites having power, and they do control the media, and they control the money, and they can psyop us. But at the end of the day, COVID proved that it's only what we will tolerate. If the people will not tolerate it, eventually they have to change course, or they have to change the lie, or they have to lighten the restriction.
That's really what happened. Nobody believes it anymore.
Nobody believes it, so yeah. We still believe it. We don't still believe it. So we still have to use your brain, you're not loves culture, loves history, you're full of love, there's no hate, and do that, you'll be surprised. Very, very much. Thank you.
Νερό και κάποια νερό κανονικό, πίνουν μόνο από τα φρούτα και αυτό είναι το καλύτερα φιλτραρισμένο νερό που υπάρχει. Η φύση φιλτράρει το νερό μέσω των φρούτων στο έπακρο και αυτό είναι το καλύτερο φίλτρο. Που με ρωτήσατε για το νερό, είναι το καλύτερο νερό που μπορείτε να πιείτε από τα φρούτα. Το πράγμα που να είναι οι διατάσεις, οι τάσεις του. Οι διατάσεις που αρχίζουν στο άμα δεν είναι καλή, δεν είναι καλά όλο το σώμα σας. Οπότε οι διατάσεις είναι ένα πάρα πολύ σημαντικό κομμάτι της ημέρας μου και γι' αυτό σας προτείνω να κάνετε εσείς διατάσεις ό,τι μπορείτε. Έστω λίγο πριν κάνετε στο τέλος της ημέρας, να νιώσετε πάρα πολύ καλύτερα και θα ανοίγετε στο πρόσωπό σας, θα δείτε τι λάμψη που θα πάρετε, διότι ο οργανισμός διαχειρίζεται μέσα στο σώμα πολύ με διατάσεις. Ένα άλλο πράγμα ο ίδιος άνεμος αυτή τη στιγμή. Οι τεχνικές απνών, θα σας πω με τεχνικές απνών, πολλά βίντεο για τις αναπνοές και ένα ολόκληρο βίντεο που σας δείχνω κιόλας πώς θα ενεργοποιήσετε πολλές ουσίες στον εγκεφαλό σας στον αναπνό, γιατί έχουμε να ενεργοποιούμε στον αναπνό και όλο το σώμα μας χρειάζεται αναπνοές για να στο αίμα μας είναι πάρα πολύ σημαντικά. Κάτι άλλο πράγμα είναι να γράφω τις μπάρες, επειδή στο γράφω από την τουλάχιστον τις μπάρες την ημέρα, μουσική, η φίλη μου, η παραγωγή, και την αγάπη μου, να ασχολείστε με το επάγγελμά σας. Εμένα, όσο πριν δεν είναι η δουλειά μου, αλλοδικά εργασία, εγώ είναι το επάγγελμά μου. Είναι κάτι που πρέπει να το ζωή. Πρέπει να βρείτε κι εσείς μια σχολεία, να κάνετε κάτι, γιατί όλοι οι άνθρωποι είναι ταλέντα και πρέπει να τα αναπτύξετε, να ζωγραφίζετε, ό,τι θέλετε να πλάθετε, να ασχολείστε με κάτι, να φτιάχνετε κάτι λειτουργική και να επέλεσετε ό,τι μπορείτε να φανταστείτε. Υπάρχουν όρια στην τέχνη, μπορείτε να γράφετε τις σκέψεις σας, τα όνειρά σας, ό,τι μπορείτε να φανταστείτε, πάντως να έχετε ένα χόμπι, να σας κάνει χαρούμενους εκτός δουλειά σας ή ό,τι άλλο κάνετε. Προσωπικά γράφω και κάτι βιβλία, οπότε καθημερινά γράφω λίγες προτάσεις ώστε να είμαι ενεργός στα βιβλία. Χάλασε ολοκληρωτικά έχασα τον υπολογιστή μου, δεν έχω πια υπολογιστή και αυτό είναι ένα άλλο πλήγμα των φυσικής. Πολλά συμβαίνουν, που με δώσανε και είχα ένα δικό, πάρα πολλά κακά, αλλά δεν το βάζουμε κάτω. Είναι προτάσεις βιβλίου δηλαδή. Θεραπεία, όπως σας είπα, θεραπεία, γεωθέση, είναι ένα που μπορείτε να κάνετε, το ήλιο να ξυπνάτε και το πρωί όταν βγαίνει ο ήλιος, μία ώρα αφού βγει ο ήλιος, μία ώρα πριν θύσει, μία ώρα μετά την ανατολή και μία ώρα πριν τη δύση, που είναι η κατάλληλη ώρα την ηλιοθέραση, γιατί δεν πράγματα τον ήλιο εκτός από αυτόν τον χρόνο. Πολύ σημαντικό να κάνετε ηλιοθέαση, ηλιοθεραπεία. Τώρα ο ήλιος είναι πάρα πολύ βλαβερός. Ο ήλιος δεν είναι όπως τον έχουν κακολογήσει οι εταιρείες που θέλουν να πουλάνε τα δηλητήριά τους, τα καρκινογόνα. 10 με 4 τώρα το καλοκαίρι, να αποφεύγετε να είσαστε τόσο πολύ στον ήλιο. 10 λεπτάκια είναι καλό, αλλά 12 με 4, ας πούμε, εκεί 10 με 4 είναι λίγο δυνατός ο ήλιος, οπότε αποφεύγετε μόνο τον ήλιο. 3